At Planet Fitness, Leap Day means an extra day of energy. And who doesn't love energy? To celebrate, now through February 29th, you can join for 29 cents down, $10 a month, and pay nothing until March 17th. Even better, you'll get free fitness training and equipment for every workout, with most clubs open 24 hours. So take advantage of your extra day and get energized at Planet Fitness. Join for 29 cents down, $10 a month, cancel anytime, and pay nothing until March 17th. Deal ends February 29th. See Home Club for details.
Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oten, and former therapist with a background in counseling psychology. This podcast is for strong, high-achieving women who want more in their lives and relationships, who are ready to rise to the next level of growth, healing, and evolution. Nothing changes until you change. And when you change, everything else changes around you as a result. If you're done with feeling powerless within the chaotic and toxic dynamics in your relationship and don't even know where to begin with making changes, I've got you covered. I know you've tried everything, including counseling, watching hours of videos, and reading stacks of books on narcissism, and find that all it does is leave you feeling even more stuck and in the same place. None of these things work when you're living with a narcissistic spouse because the root causes of the symptoms are not being addressed. As with physical health, there is an emotional, physical, spiritual, and psychological component to healing and overcoming the problematic symptoms and pain you're facing every day in your life and relationship. If you're ready for a direct, no fluff, no nonsense approach to take you into your personal power and take back your life, you are in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode. In this episode, I am interviewing someone who was on the show last year around this time. She was sharing her journey, and I asked her to come on only because she was really someone that stood out in the group. Like all the women that I've coached with in groups and one-on-one, they're all amazing and courageous and all of that, but there are some times when some women's stories just kind of stand out because of how rapidly they're able to go from feeling stuck, joining the program, signing on to work with me, to actually leaving the relationship. And I know everyone's on their own journey, so it's not about, comparing timing and all that, but I wanted to ask her, like, what was it that pushed her over that edge so quickly after joining the program? And again, this isn't to compare anyone else's journey because everyone's journey is different, but maybe you can glean something from where she's at, where she was at. And I'm going to put that first episode in the show notes of this podcast so you can listen to part one if you did not hear her before story. And then you're going to hear in this updated episode interview what she's done since, what she's accomplished since leaving, and what her life looks like now. We're talking about the good, the bad, the ugly, the good parts of leaving one of these relationships, the really hard parts, the parts that don't get easier right away, and everything in between. So I hope that you enjoy this episode, and let's play it right now. Okay. All right, so welcome back, Autumn. You were on the show, I believe it was last year. You'd probably know the date better than I would because you had just left your relationship. And for the listeners, I'm going to post that first interview along with this one, so just have a look for that. So why don't you give us a little bit of an update about, where you are now, what's, how that process has been. How many months ago was that now that you got out?
Just about 16 months. I'm about a week shy of 16 months of having.
How has that been? Like, I know it's a roller coaster, right? It's not just all like, let's leave and have everything be rainbows and butterflies. So we're going to talk real, like what that's really like to come out the other side.
Well, and I think that's part of it. I'm not out the other side. I'm about 16 months in. We go back for a second mediation next week. So I am nowhere near divorced.
Yeah, it's not a smooth thing, is it?
No, despite I don't even want to contemplate how many thousands in attorney bills and the time, the stress, just the emotional wear and tear of that. So yeah, so a year later, basically we're recording again and I'm still not divorced. Um, so that's that. Lots of good things, lots of bad things. Definitely a ride that I was not entirely prepared for. And I'm not sure that you can be.
I think that's the thing that scares us into not wanting to take that step, because it's all the unknown. And, you sometimes hear the other side of stories of women leaving and they're thriving and there's this and there's this wonderful magical partner and everything they ever wanted. But that's not in those early stages, most likely. That maybe is like years down the road with a lot of inner work and healing what you've been through, because leaving doesn't erase the effects of it.
I think that's the biggest thing. My therapist said, so you really thought you were just going to leave and you weren't going to have any problems after this. And I don't think I would have said that right out loud, but I think that there was some expectation, like, and it's the funny things, and I don't know how deeply you want to dig into this, but it's the first few months it was not being able to leave the ice cube trays unfilled. And then finally being able to get to a place where I could leave the ice cube trays unfilled.
So what did the ice cube trays represent?
Oh my gosh, it was this, I mean, it sounds so ridiculous to say this out loud, but it was this relentless campaign of you never fill the ice cube trays. And every time I used a cube, literally a cube, I would fill the ice cube tray so that he wouldn't yell at me about not filling the ice cube trays. But he would still always yell at me about not filling the ice cube trays. And I know that's such a bizarre, small example, but it's been shocking to me how crippling some of that has been and undoing some of that has been. Because it's not about the ice cube trays, it's about the gaslighting and the denial of reality, and me always chasing and running and trying to get ahead of what he was going to be angry about next, and never ever getting there.
Oh my gosh, it's like a hamster wheel. And when you were saying that, like I could feel that in my body. Like I totally get that. Like to you, you're like, it's a small thing. No, it's these paper cuts, right? It's these things all day long, but you're not saying it's like, oh, he really liked me to refill the ice cube tray and would gently remind me or make a joke of it. No, you were scared of his wrath. So sometimes it's hard because in relationships, there are things that we like the other person to do that annoys us, but there's a difference between being annoyed and maybe just being quiet and doing it yourself, and yelling and you're being scared, right? This is where there's this continuum of what's like normal-ish and what's like on the other spectrum of like you're scared if you don't do that. And so now you've got that voice in the back of your head. You hear his voice with the ice cube trays.
Absolutely. And it was something that he made fun of in public too. And other people would laugh because in a normal relationship, that would be a joke.
It'd be a joke. It wouldn't be something that you'd be scared of.
Yes, but it was something that you would laugh in public with other people about, but it would also be very gaslighty, right? Because, well, she never fills up the ice cube trays, ha ha ha, but it wasn't ha 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 ever.
Yeah, and these relationships are made up of a string of all these stupid, dumb things that become this big thing. Like, so now you're living your life and you get to do whatever you want with the ice cube trays, right? But you still have this thing, what would he say, right? And it's like rewiring
Right.
all of that, right?
Oh, and it took months to be able to leave the ice cube trays unfilled. And then I almost had to do it intentionally and be anxious and scared to leave them unfilled. And before I could decide how often I actually want to fill the ice cube trays.
Yeah, what you want, like what works for you, right? What do you need? And I think, we have to look at, being on the other side and realizing like what part of our personality traits kind of are a match for that, like our people pleasing and our fear of not living up to someone else's standards, like those kinds of things. We have to take ownership for that, right? To say you fill up the damn ice cube trays yourself if you want it so badly. We're too terrified and silenced to be able to even do that. Like you don't get to yell at me and rage because of the ice cube trays. Like how ridiculous, right? Even that we're talking about it, but those that have been in these relationships get it. They get it that there's a lot of nitpicky stuff that goes on. And you're made to pay in some way if you're not living up to their standards of what they think you should be doing.
Well, and if you aren't good enough, smart enough, whatever enough to keep the ice cube trays full, then how can you ever feel competent or capable enough to do anything else?
Yeah.
Like it's this eroding of your self-esteem from the very base.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, and that's the whole thing. It's the degrading and the devaluing of you as a person because of something so silly, right? So, I think this is really, it's not, I feel like being real and raw about this kind of stuff is going to be more valuable to those listening than us saying, oh no, it's all great on the other side. There's stuff coming for you on the other side, guaranteed. Hopefully nothing serious and too earth-shattering. But like I've been sharing a little bit about like my sudden like health crisis that knocked me out of my ass for a month. There's stuff coming for you. I'm sorry, but there is. It's not going to just be smooth sailing. I hope that it is, but I've never worked with a woman on the other side of leaving within that first year or two that didn't have stories to tell about the nightmares, because you're not dealing with a rational, sane person.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how many, I feel like every conversation I have to have starts with, I'm in the middle of this really ugly divorce with this really difficult person, and I need your help to get this bill paid, to resolve this situation. There's just a lot of crazy making that's happening on the other side, changing mailing addresses, changing billing, changing all of these things. I mean, I've been through it. The accounts have been drained, stuff has been taken, the children have been used relentlessly as a weapon. I mean, you name it, it's happened in the last 15, 16 months. But I'm just in this position where I'm constantly saying, okay, this is where I'm at, and I need you to help me resolve this situation.
Well, that's good though, because then you're
um,
asking for help, right?
I'm out of choices. I'm out of choices. It feels like anyway, out of choices, but to ask for help from people because the situation is so ridiculous that it defies, like you said, any kind of rational explanation. I'll be having a conversation with somebody that we do business with, and he'll be like, well, why would they do that? And I'm like, I apologize, but we're not dealing with a rational person.
Oh my
I
gosh,
know
I've heard that.
so.
It's
I
like,
know.
why don't you just do this? Why don't you just do that?
Why won't you just pay the bill? We're not dealing with a rational person at this point. And so it's been a ride, and it's not all been fun. And I've kind of had to come to a place too, again, doing the work in your classes, being in therapy, all of the things where it was said, my therapist also said to me, I said, again, my control is fine. The parts of my life that are under my control are fine. I wrote a book. I'm a book coach. I have an in-person job that I love. Like, all those things are great, right? But anything connected with him is a nightmare. And she's like, it's always going to be that way. Again, that makes sense, right? But I don't think that I really understood in my bones that anything that was ever connected with him for the rest of my life probably is going to be a nightmare, and coming to a place of acceptance about that.
Yeah, I mean, to a level, because your kids are grown, are they not?
They're 20 and 22, probably aren't ever going to happen. My grandparents were divorced. They could be in a room together. They were civil. They were kind. I grew up not really even understanding that people didn't get divorced in that, in the 70s, early 80s, right? Like, because everything was so peaceful and amicable, at least in front of us. And I'm not ever going to have that.
Right.
And
It's a grieving.
there is a lot of grieving. A lot.
I want to go back to something you said before I forget, because I have brain fog right now. You said something really profound. I think it might be helpful for others for me to highlight it. Because what you said was, anything that's within my control that is about me, that I have possession over, you're in this like vortex of craziness that you don't know anything outside of it until you remove yourself from it. So I thought that was really profound. And I wonder, when you are just kind of doing your own thing, and how that feels now, like even this distance afterwards, to when you actually have to engage with him and deal with him, like what is that like for you still?
Oh my gosh. Well, because the children were older, I had the luxury of breaking contact. So I have not had a conversation with him for probably 13 to 14 months.
Oh, good.
I've had to be in a room with him twice. The second time I had to be in it, one was in the courthouse. The second time we had to appraise some of our personal property. And I'll tell this story because, again, it's like the ice cubes. So because the divorce won't resolve, he won't settle, we have to have all of our personal property appraised. Well, what is your personal property? It is your laptop, your bed, your sheets, I've got a typewriter. You know what I'm saying? Like, we had to have this appraised. Well, we have some joint personal property in a second location. We have a motor home in this building. So we have to have this appraiser go to this building, and he's arguing with the appraiser. We've already had all this done. And I'm like, I need you to go in the motor home. There's some personal property in there that needs to be appraised. And the guy kind of looks at me. I'm like, there's appliances in there. There's household goods. There's sheets. And my ex throws his arms up in the air and says, well, I guess we're going to go. How did he say that? I guess we're going to go appraise the sheets. And so he posted this on Facebook. He has told everyone that I know that I forced him to appraise our sheets. And it's so that's what engaging with him is like. It's this huge, and there was this huge battle to even get the appraiser on the joint property that was going on up until the appraiser left and then had to go back. And I mean, it was just this. And my day-to-day life, like, I get up, I eat my breakfast, I do my things, I go to work, I go to bed, I talk to clients, I write my book, and things just, they flow. But that would be like, that's what happens when there's any kind of contact with them.
Yeah. And I think anyone listening that's dealt with one of these personalities, these types, they're totally nodding their head like, yeah, right? Because they can take the smallest thing and turn it into this big like shitstorm. And then you feel like you're like caught in it, and we forget, especially when you're not with them anymore. It's like, I don't have to, if you want to do that, you fill your boots, you figure it all out. I'm not engaging in any of that. Right. It's like,
and I did. I'm like, okay. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable. I'm going to be in my car. And I stayed in my car for the rest of the appraisal. But in that moment, it was interesting to watch, like, me wanting to make the appraiser comfortable, right, and make sure that he wasn't uncomfortable with the situation. And then after I find out, all the things that have been blasted on social media, the shame.
yes,
and the blame, even though it's not my fault that we're in this situation where our personal property had to be appraised, there was just still like the shame, like that.
wow.
Your dirty laundry's on display. It's lovely.
Yeah. And I do think, there are different levels to what these guys will do too. Like, some of them will just make it their mission to make the rest of your life as far as they can a living hell, right? Like, that's kind of what he's doing now. He's kicking in the sandbox. He's like, you're going to pay. That's what he's thinking in his mind, right? So what are the things that you're doing? So we've talked, like, we don't want to make this like a girls, ladies, like, don't leave because it's hell on the other side. We want to talk about, okay, so yeah, we have to deal with all this, but what is the difference now for you that you're out, and you do have your own space, your own place, your own routines?
So it's interesting because, like, that's a thing that happened, but that was 10 minutes in person or less, and a couple of days where I felt uncomfortable in myself, right? Mm-hmm. Versus this 24/7 level of anxiety and all the ways it was manifesting in my health and my inability to sleep and my relationships and all the things that I just wasn't able to do because so much time, effort, energy, etc. was wrapped up in him and trying to keep him from not being mad about the ice cube trays, right? And so without that in my life, right, I'm able to publish a book, I'm able to coach, I'm able to do lots of things that I wasn't. It's totally worth it. It's totally worth it. I wouldn't undo it. And also it's difficult.
Yeah. It can be both at the same time, right? Yeah. And I think too, like, those of us that do come out that other side, we have this grit, like this tenacity and this strength to, figure out whatever we need to do to figure out, like, I still have daughters at home, but like, there have been times, right? It's like, I feel really alone. Like, I feel like I have to figure every single thing out on my own, and I do. It's just, and then it's like, yeah, Leanne, of course you did, but it's not much different than when you were with someone, right? Like, it's, sure, it'd be nice to have help, but we are strong, tenacious women. Almost all women I've ever worked with, they're amazing. And what they can do when they're not being bogged down by all of that craziness and all of that toxicity. Like you said, you came out and you published a book. So we're going to get into that in a minute. What I want to ask you too is, as far as dating and other relationships, I know that you had mentioned something about that. So I wanted to chat about that. How is that going for you, or where are you at with that?
Couple of things, because it's twofold. When I left, I immediately cut out a lot of people out of my life that were his friends, before we got married. And I just felt like there were just some lines and some boundaries I wanted to put up, and that I wasn't asking other people to decide, that I was proactively deciding for myself. There were some people I left in the middle that I knew would be in the middle. And I've had to let some of those people go. Friendships I've had for 30 years. Like,
Wow.
I let them make decisions, and they made those decisions. And so that was expected, but is still difficult. So there's that. And on the flip side, I've retained some friends that I didn't expect to keep, quote unquote, in the divorce, that have been really supportive and have messaged me like, "Hey, Autumn, we bought your book. We're so excited to read it." Things like that. So there's positives and negatives with that. Dating is the most difficult thing I've done. I think dating was more difficult than leaving. And I would say that because it brings up all of your stuff. It brings up all of your stuff and highlights it in a way that I could not have anticipated. I feel like dating has been like a mirror that shows me just how dysfunctional the relationship really was, and keeps chipping away at this image that I had. I think that it was ever any good, or that it ever really was functional. It has been terrifying sometimes, to be really, really honest. I've had moments where I was in the car with someone and they asked where I wanted to eat, and I literally could not answer. I choked, I panicked, my face was red, my heart is just pounding out of my chest, because I'm terrified that this person is going to be angry at me, that I'm not going to pick the right thing or say the right thing or want to do the right thing. Totally irrational. I have no experience with this person to suggest that I should feel that way. And then like having to deal with the aftermath of that, and to see yourself having this reaction to such a simple question, and then having to really acknowledge to yourself how profoundly the abuse has affected you.
Yes, I love this topic so much that I eventually want to be talking more about it, because it brings up all of your wounds. It brings up all of your triggers. And some say, make sure you're fully healed before you even consider dating. And yeah, it takes some time, to like get your grounding. But I don't know, for me, I love being alone, but I also love being in a relationship too, a good relationship, not a crazy one. But it does bring out all of your triggers, and nothing else. Like, you could stay single for 10 years and get in a relationship and all your triggers are going to come up. So this idea that we need to be fully healed before we even consider that I think that's bullshit. Do it when you feel ready to do it. Some women I talk to, they're like, because I remember you saying, I feel like throwing up when I think about dating when you're in my program, right? Because we touched on dating and like safety and how to use the apps and how to have boundaries, like in the Thriving After Narcissistic Abuse program. You're like, the idea of dating makes me want to throw up, but aren't you glad that you took that now, so you kind of know?
Well, and how it happened is a whole different kind of story, but there is no way that I could have healed as much as I've healed without this mirror, without this reflection. And it's not this person hasn't healed me, or hasn't. They're a wonderful person, and that they're awesome, and that's cool, but this is about me. Yeah. Seeing my stuff, owning my stuff. Yeah. Choosing to still engage,
yes,
even though it's scary and difficult, and to be willing to stay in the ring long enough to sort this all out.
Absolutely, because the urges and the trauma triggers that make you want to kind of pull back, and run. Like those triggers that are just like, run, this is the same situation, run, right? And it's also, when you were saying about the healing being our own, yes, because we have to have that courage to open up, right? Because your tendencies to want to close down, armor, like boundaries, right?
Yeah.
But to be able to open your heart again and think, I could get hurt again. And I know I hear this from women, like, what if I'm being tricked? Or what if he's the same thing? We're just in the like nice phase, because we all experience the nice phase, right? But the part I think where a partner can aid in our healing is in their responses to our triggers. And when we're upset, when something has triggered us, listening to our feelings, listening and taking in our needs, like that's the healing, right? If you're with someone that's doing more of the same, you're going to be more further traumatized and damaged. So I think that's worth saying, like you can do a lot more healing with someone who's a safe person. They don't have to be perfect,
Absolutely.
but someone who's safe for you to express.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't have I wasn't trying to date when this kind of happened. I was not interested. And there was a level of trust with this person that has allowed that healing. And I have a great story with a reaction. So another issue in my former life was water getting on the floor. So
Right.
I had kids, the bathroom was next to the kitchen. There's always water on the floor, no matter what I did. It is just life, and he would step in water, my ex would, and he would scream and rant and throw things and yell. He might as well live in a fucking swamp, and he might as well just dip his toes in water before, and I mean, it was this thing. And it was
go
also
on
a
and on.
public thing. Oh yeah. But it was also this public thing too, right? Like he would tell people stories how he stepped in water all the time on the floor. It was this big joke, right? And it wasn't a joke. And so water spilled on the floor here. And this person that I was dating took his sock and just wiped up the water with his foot. And I literally just had a stroke. Like, I'm like, oh my God, you just stepped in water. You just stepped in water. And he's looking at me like I'm insane, right? Because I'm sure I looked insane in the moment. Like, no, your sock is wet and you're leaving and your sock is wet and you're going to drive 40 minutes home and your sock's going to be wet. And he's like, it'll dry. And I'm like, but no, and I'm just having this full scale meltdown. And he's like, it's okay. It's all right. I'm a grown man. My sock can get wet and I can be okay.
Yeah.
And he left, and we actually had to have a conversation again about it later, because like I felt like I had to explain why my reaction was so strong and why I was so upset. I mean, I was visibly upset. I mean, and again, it sounds like such a ridiculous thing, but it's not. And yeah, and if I had been with someone else who had been pissed off that he stepped in water, I mean, I cannot fathom what that would have been like, what the fallout for me would have been like.
Right. Yeah.
That
would have brought it all back.
Reinforced.
Yeah. It's the thing. It's the culmination of these repetitive reactions that you get to these like everyday normal things. There's a difference between being annoyed about water on the floor and stepping in. I don't like doing that either. But to rage about it and flip out and like tantrum and go on and on and on and rant, like that's the difference.
To the point that you're fearful that water is on the floor, and that you're looking for water on the floor, and you're trying to prevent water from being on the floor because he's going to be mad. And once he's mad, that is going to spread to everything and everyone that he comes in contact with. Right. For I don't know how long. He's going to be mad at the kids. He's going to be mad at me. He's going to be mad at our employees. He's going to be, and you're just so fearful of that anger all the time that you will fill the ice cube trays every time you use one ice cube and watch the floor like a hawk to make sure that there's not a drop on it.
Right. And that is the enabling aspect, right, of the hero role. We take on the hero role literally to make sure everything and everyone is okay. And we think that we are responsible for all of that. That's our first mistake, right? That we are responsible for making sure that he doesn't take it out on this long list of people. Like we really think we're that powerful, right?
Right.
What an exhausting heavy weight to have to carry. And we don't have to. Like the women that are listening are probably understanding, and they're probably linking it to some of their own similar situations, right? That it's not your responsibility to make sure a grown man doesn't have a temper tantrum. Please, are we dealing with a 3-year-old? Right? It's that's our own dysfunction we have to take ownership for, where we have gotten so far into it that we've lost ourselves to the point where you're worrying about drops of water on the floor or an empty ice cube tray, right? Like this, I think helps, I think the other thing that can happen though too with dating is we can end up just, because we're not experiencing any of that extreme crazy stuff, we can also settle for low effort and just some of the bare minimum basics of like respect and decency, right? So we have to really get clear on what it is that if we're going to have a life partner, what exactly does that look like and what do we want? And it doesn't always mean it's someone that you're going to be with forevermore. It's like they say, Mr. Right Now, the person that, you're enjoying your life being with. So are you still dating this person, or was that like a past tense thing?
Yeah, I'm still dating that person. And yeah, it's figuring out like what it is that you actually want and what you want your life to look like, the life that I'm living. Like it's interesting. When I first left, I think I kind of kept up a lot of things that we had always done to a certain extent. And I kind of was living in a weird way, kind of a similar life. And like, as time has passed, I'm like, I really don't like going out to eat very much. That was something we did all the time. And so I don't really do that very much anymore. If I'm going to meet a friend, then I do, but that's about it because I just don't really enjoy it that much.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's sorting out kind of all of these weird things. Like the plan had always been to winter in Florida. I live on a lake up here now, and to winter in Florida. Do I even really want to do that now? Is that really what I want? Is that what I want my life to look like? And really, and I don't have the answers yet. I really don't. I'm still sorting, a lot of sorting.
Yeah. Yeah. And those first few years are, I think, a lot of that too. So yeah, wow. I think, it's a journey. And I've heard of women years later down the road, like have flashbacks or triggers, or like, I just think these relationships do leave an imprint on you in some way, but we don't have to let that define us or affect us. Like you're already doing it where you're noticing where you're behaving in the old ways, that you don't have to anymore. And you get to ask yourself, is this what I want? That's healing, right? That is what healing looks like, is we have to discern that for ourselves. And then, yeah, like the other thing I think a lot of women tell me is the fear of like getting trapped again. So like the fear of living with someone is like the big one, right? Like making that big, huge step, especially when we already have our own space and like our own alone time, our own, it's to think about blending that with someone again is terrifying for most.
I'm not there yet.
No,
I'm
no,
nowhere near there yet. No, I'm still,
no.
I'm still, one of the things was when we had separated and reconciled, my ex and I had insisted that we get garbage service at our house. It's a long story. And there was this big argument, like, I'm lazy, I'm never going to take the garbage out, I'm never going to do this, I'm never going to do that, was what I was told. So every week, like I marched out there and I drug those garbage cans to the curb, and I didn't miss a week, probably for over a year, because like, I am not lazy, I am not irresponsible, I can take the garbage out, right? And the other day, I didn't take the garbage out. And I think that like I'm getting to that point where I've kind of rebelled against and kind of fought back against, I'm not all these things that you say that I am. And now I'm getting to the point where like I get to decide whether I take the garbage out every week. I get to decide if that's a priority for me or not. And I'm not a bad person if water gets on the floor, and I'm not a bad person if the ice cube tray doesn't get filled, and I'm not a bad person if I don't take the garbage out. And that's been a 15-month process.
It's almost like you're learning to walk again, the basic stuff that this just goes to show you how far down we go as far as like devaluing ourselves and like completely losing ourselves to appease another person, like how far we actually can go with that. I remember one ETC woman I was coaching a few years ago, and it stands out to me because her then husband would rage at her if she didn't get the stains out of his shorts. And my question to her was, why the hell are you washing his shorts? Like, he's a grown man. And he's raging because there's stains in his shorts. Like just it goes so far, right? To where these women are just shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. So let's chat about, what you've been able to create as far as, your work life, your career, and writing this book. Did you write this book like within this time frame from leaving to now, or was it in the works
No,
before?
actually, I wrote it before I left. He didn't like it, even though it is probably the most sanitized version I could have written about what was happening at the time. And at the time, I didn't understand I was in an abusive relationship. I really didn't. I just knew I was in a really bad place and I had to do something different to dig myself out. That was around 2014 when the book is called How Do You Like Your Eggs? Embrace Your Decision-Making Power. And so I tell this story about this breakfast I cooked him at 4 a.m. that he didn't eat. And that's kind of how the book starts. And that's where I started. I really think digging myself out enough to a point where I could accept that I was in an abusive relationship, that I could seek help from people like you, take a class, like End the Cycle and the Taking Back Your Life class after that. Like that was 2014. It was 8 years to kind of get from from one end of that to the other. So I wrote the book probably around 2020 and did not publish it until last year
Wow.
in 2023. Yeah.
Oh, that's impressive. That's
Yeah.
very good. Did you have to edit it or add anything to it, or was this just merely like getting it edited and published as it was, or how did that process go?
So at the time, it was a funny story. This woman that I was a life coach, and this woman that I did some programs with and had worked with her said, "Hey, I'm going to do this book writing program. Do you want to do this as a beta?" And so I did, and I ended up becoming a book writing coach for her, and did that until last year when things with the divorce got out of hand. I kind of had to step back for a little while. And so she had a program where she helped you publish. So the book was basically done. She did some editing, formatting, some things, did the cover, did a beautiful job. I love it. But yeah, that's how I got there.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So what I'll do is, do you have a website link or like an actual page for it?
My website is my first and middle name because being in the middle of where I am. So it's Autumn Lynn, AutumnLynne.com. The book is on Amazon. How Do You Like Your Eggs? Embracing Your Decision-Making Power. And then I also have on my website where I've launched a book coaching program. I have an ebook, Why You Don't Write Your Book. Talking about all the things that get in the way from us doing the things that we want to do. So that's available on the website also.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure to get that website in the show notes as well in case someone's driving. And, I always like to add that in. So I'll get that from you after we close up. That's amazing. So in closing, if there's a woman listening, she's in a relationship like this, or maybe she's on her way out of the relationship, what are some words of wisdom that you'd like to give her?
In the last podcast, I talked about creating your circles, finding the supports where you can. And I think the most important thing that I did, again, this is in hindsight, I didn't do it intentionally. When I went to file for divorce, I knew I was going to need a lot of help. So I signed up for End the Cycle and took that class, and I had signed up for another group, but putting myself in rooms with powerful women, strong women who were living their lives and doing their things, like is probably the most important thing that I did to help myself through this process, by far. And the support, the way that they reflected my value differently than I've seen my own value. It's just opened a lot of doors and a lot of opportunities for me that I wouldn't have had if I stayed married. If I had stayed married, I wouldn't have ever published this book. I wouldn't be a book coach. I was gifted this amazing trip to Spain this last year. Like, there's like so many things that would not have happened if I had stayed. And they're from small things, from, not having to be afraid of the ice cube trays, right? To publishing a book. Like it's worth it, but I'm just not going to lie and say that it was easy.
Yeah,
or is easy.
It isn't, right? It's a big decision. And in that, I think, the fact that you blossomed as you have, I think that's really inspiring. And I think, when you're not being bogged down by someone that is holding you back, making you feel less than, exactly how you're saying, how the heck do you flourish and tap into your creativity and your inspiration? Like, you lose all of that. It's like, I have nothing to draw from. It's gone. So when you get away from that, everything opens up. It opens up. And one thing that came to mind when you were talking about circles, I very much agree with you on that, because a lot of times our family is not our circle. Like, we're not going to get, like, a lot of times our families are dysfunctional or some unhealthy aspects, which is why we end up in these relationships anyways. So to go to family for support with this, a lot of times is not good. You'll end up getting gaslighting or minimizing, or they'll side with the other person. I've seen that so many times. And like you said, I've seen women also lose friends, like long-term friends, relatives. So yeah, I think having a supportive community around you, even before you take those steps to leave, as you did, you were able to get out rather quickly when you're in the program, if I recall. Like, very beginning of the program, you were making those steps to, how do I actually do this? So yeah, it's having the right support. You go to the wrong people, they're not going to encourage you to fly. They're going to tell you to stay small and stay where you are and stay for the kids and make it work a lot of times.
Absolutely. And that's why I stayed as long as I did. There were people in my circles they had a dog in the fight in me leaving. They did not want me to leave. Their lives would be harder if I left, or different. And that's a tough one. I'm fortunate that I really have good family and good friends and tons of support. But also I'm 16 months into this and I'm not done. There is only so much one person can listen to.
Oh, absolutely. You are 100% right. And I think this is a really good thing to end with. I fully agree with you on that. I even did a podcast on, like, your friends and family are not your therapists.
Yeah.
You need to decide, like, what role they're going to have in this. And then, you need to invest and hire out in coaching or getting therapy from someone that actually can move you through this. There's a difference between just talk therapy to process and, like, let's move you forward, which is my style. Is kind of a blend of both, especially if it's one-on-one, but my programs are very much about, like, let's move you forward, because, and there's a place for all of it. But I know for me, I definitely needed external support that was not family. I had, I have a couple of really close friends that were like, they're the type of friends that are like there for you when you're like down and out. But that's really all we need, right? We don't need a whole circle of surface level friendships. That's how I am. I prefer to have a few really close ride or die friends than, because I'm not like a huge social person. I love being at home. I like being with my dogs and my girls being here. Like, I'm more of a homebody. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing to close on, is making sure you have that circle of support, having the right kind of support, and not relying too much on friends and family to be the person, like, your venting go-to, because people do get tired of hearing about it, especially when there's nothing they can actually do about it. And so it can kind of put a drain on other people, I think.
Absolutely. And investing, like you said, specifically, I think that I invested in another coaching program. I invested in your program. I think that was huge, like, because you're surrounded then by people who want to go forward and who are growing and who are literally financially investing in themselves moving forward. And I think there's a difference in the atmosphere in those kinds of rooms where you're paying to participate, and there's nothing wrong with free groups or anything like that. I'm not shaming anyone, because sometimes that's just not an option. I was very fortunate that it was for me. But there's definitely something to be said for that.
Absolutely, because we're moving toward a focus and a solution rather than just talking about the problems over and over. You're coming in to find a solution. Yeah, I absolutely agree with you on that. So Autumn, this has been awesome, and I'm so glad to have been able to connect with you and do this again. I think it's a great follow-up. Your first one got a lot of downloads. I can't remember how many, but it was one that many clients that have worked with me have been like, I listened to that podcast of hers, and then I realized I needed to get in touch with you.
Oh, that makes me so happy. Oh,
Yeah.
that made my whole day. Thank you. That made me so happy.
Yeah. So I will, the book link will be, her website and book title and everything will be in the show notes. that. And I guess that covers everything. And I really appreciate your time coming on.
Thank you, Leanne.
Thanks so much for tuning in to this edition of the Awakening Women podcast. If you love this episode, please take a moment to share it and leave a 5-star rating and review. If you're ready to take your next step, head to the link in the show notes to sign up for my latest free class. Also, be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Awakening Women Official and join the conversation. Thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again in the next episode. Take care of yourself in the meantime, and I'll see you online.